Francesco Guardi. B. Venice, 1712. D. Venice, 1793. The principal member of a family of painters, Guardi is best remembered for his views of Venice. These were often based on Canaletto's pictures, although Guardi's approach was very different. His style was sketchy and spontaneous, but his best works have a shimmering, atmospheric quality. This did not prove popular with tourists, who preferred the sharper detail and greater accuracy of Canaletto. As a result, Guardi gained little recognition and died in poverty, although he was later feted by the Impressionists. Guardi also specialized in the capriccio, caprice. His versions usually took the form of an imaginary landscape, featuring invented ruins picturesquely covered in creepers. Guardi's sister married the artist Tiepolo, while his son, Giacomo, also became a painter. Venice, Piazza San Marco, detail. In his views, Guardi placed far more emphasis on the figures than Canaletto did. See 1760, oil on canvas, 72 by 119 centimeters, National Gallery, London, UK. Caprice with Ruins. Guardi created a series of paintings of imaginary ruins, inspired by excavations on the islands in the Venetian lagoon. See 1775-80, oil on canvas, Victoria and Albert Museum, London, UK. Bernardo Bellotto. B. Venice, 1721. D. Warsaw, 1780. Bellotto was Canaletto's nephew, and joined him as a pupil and later as a member of his workshop. Not surprisingly, his early work was strongly influenced by the master, and some of his Venetian scenes have been mistaken for Canaletto's tea. His confusion may well have been intentional, as he often used his uncle's name. Bellotto only worked in Venice for a limited time, however, spending most of his career in Dresden, Vienna, and Warsaw. Here, he worked mainly for royal patrons, rather than tourists, and his mature style is marked by a fine attention to detail. Indeed, his scenes of Warsaw are so accurate that they were used during the reconstruction of the city following World War II. Entrance to the Grand Canal, Venice. This is almost identical to one of Canaletto's views. See 1745, oil on canvas, 59 by 95 centimeters, Fitzwilliam Museum, Cambridge, UK. William Hogarth. B. London, 1697. D. London, 1764. Pugnacious, patriotic, satirical, and humane, Hogarth was the outstanding British artist of his day. He devoted his life to raising the status of British artists. An innovative engraver, he was also a gifted portrait painter. But it is as the inventor of a new art form, a series of paintings on modern moral subjects, that he is best remembered. Hogarth began his career as a silver plate engraver. In 1720, he set up in business in London while studying painting in his spare time. He graduated from engraving shop cards to painting conversation pieces, theater pieces, and his Modern Moral series. Engraving these as prints for sale brought financial success, and Hogarth's campaign against unauthorized copying effectively invented artists' copyright. Lifeline. 1697, born in London, 1729, marries Jane Thornhill, daughter of painter James Thornhill. 1732, sells first Modern Moral prints, A Harlot's Progress. See 1743. 45, paints The Marriage, a La Mode series. 1753, publishes his art treatise, The Analysis of Beauty. 1764, dies in London. The Graham children, despite the smiles, symbols of death, the hourglass and scythe, reflect that the baby died while the portrait was being painted. 1742, oil on canvas, 161 by 181 centimeters, Rococo, National Gallery, London, UK. Iron context. Coffee houses. Coffee was introduced to Europe in the 1600s, and coffee houses soon sprang up in all the major cities. In Hogarth's London, they were the focus of social life, debate, and lively discussion. Along with other artists and writers, Hogarth frequented Old Slaughter's Coffee House in St. Martin's Lane. Coffee House in 1763. Engraving, artist unknown. Gin Lane. Gin drinking among the poor was at its height when Hogarth created this hellish vision of the back streets of London, as part of a campaign to support the Gin Act of 1751. The gin-soaked, snuff-taking mother is oblivious as her baby falls to its death. 1751. Etching and engraving on paper, 36 by 31 centimeters, private collection. Other pictures we see, Hogarth's we read. William Hazlitt, 1845, writer and critic. Marriage à la mode, The Toilette. This is the fourth scene of a narrative series satirizing marriages arranged for money. Here, the young countess is in her boudoir with her lover and pretentious hangers-on. See 1743-45, oil on canvas, 71 by 91 centimeters, National Gallery, London, UK. Closer look. Sign of the cuckold. Numerous details in this painting reveal that the countess is having an affair. As the boy servant unpacks a basket, we see a tray depicting Leda being seduced by the swan, Jupiter in disguise, and a figure of Actaeon, whose horns can allude to a cuckold, a man whose wife commits adultery. Richard Wilson. B. Penigos, 1713. D. Lamberis, 1782. The son of a well-to-do Welsh clergyman, Richard Wilson began his artistic career as a portrait painter but went on to transform British landscape painting into an art form of poetic vision that could express ideas and emotions. Following his apprenticeship to a London portrait painter, Wilson was working independently by 1735, but it was not until the 1750s during a trip to Italy that he decided to devote himself to landscape. He may have been influenced by encouragement from the Italian landscape painter Francesco Zuccarelli, but Wilson's primary inspiration seemed to have been the countryside around Rome and the landscapes of the 17th-century painters Claude and Gaspar Duguet. Returning to London, Wilson was the first artist to apply this idealizing, classical tradition to English and Welsh views. A founder member of the Royal Academy, Wilson was highly successful at his peak, but he had a difficult, abrasive personality, developing a severe drink problem in later years, which led to his decline and death. Lifeline. 1713 born in North Wales, 1729 apprenticed to Thomas Wright, portrait painter, 1735 working independently in London, 1750 to 56 visits Italy, working chiefly in and around Rome, see 1765 paints Snowdon from Lly in Nantle, 1768 becomes a founder member of Royal Academy. 1776 as an act of charity, Royal Academy appoints him librarian. By this time he is an alcoholic and impoverished. 1781 returns to Wales, 1782 dies in Wales. Snowdon from Lly in Nantle. This serene, classically balanced composition shows how Wilson imbued his native British landscape with an unprecedented poetic grandeur. He often painted repeats of popular, money-making compositions. There are two versions of this celebrated work. See 1765, oil on canvas, 104 by 127 centimeters, Castle Museum, Nottingham, UK. Closer look. The classical repoussoir. This composition follows the classical convention of repoussoir, from the French word repousser, to push back. The dark shapes of the trees and reflection frame a lighter center and enhance the sense of depth. Wilton House from the southeast W/I/Sun painted many impressive views of country houses, including 5 of Wilton House. The coloring and composition are reminiscent of the works of Claude and Duguet. See 1758-60, oil on canvas, collection of the Earl of Pembroke, Wilton House, Salisbury, Wiltshire, UK. Closer look. Sketching party. Following the tradition of classical landscape artists of the 17th century, Wilson often included small figures in his foregrounds. Here, a seated artist paints the view, watched thoughtfully by 2 standing companions. The silhouetted figures, lit by an aura of glowing evening light, form a picturesque group against the eye cloud reflections on the still lake. Allan Ramsay. B. Edinburgh, 1713. D. Dover, 1784. Allan Ramsay was the leading portraitist in London from about 1740 until the mid-1750s, when Joshua Reynolds began to rise to prominence. Ramsay also played a leading role in the literary and intellectual life of the time. The son of a Scottish poet, Ramsay studied in Edinburgh, London, and Italy before settling in London. It may have been Reynolds's rising reputation that led him to visit Italy again in 1755–57. In 1767, he became principal painter to George III, but it is for his intimate portraits, rather than those in the grand manner, that Ramsay is most admired. He gave up painting in 1773 after an arm injury. Portrait of Margaret Lindsay / his tender painting of his second wife has an elegantly French air. See 1758–60, oil on canvas, 74x62 cm, National Galleries of Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. David Hume Ramsay painted this wonderfully direct portrait as a gift for Hume, an eminent Scottish philosopher and historian. They were close friends. 1766, oil on canvas, 76 by 64 cm, National Galleries of Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. Animals,